Okay. Thanks to Gary Peebles here for joining us today on another episode of We Were Ports. We're focused on past players that played for Portadown over the years gone by and talk to them about their career and their time at Portadown. As I say, I have Gary Peebles with us here today. He just going to pull up his fact file here now. He joined Portadown originally on loan in 1993. Playing to the end of that season. He would then rejoin the club again in 1995 and would remain at the club then until 1997. He made a total of 82 appearances during his time at Portadown, scoring 15 goals. As I say, he made his on-loan debut on the 9th of January 1993 against Crusaders, and ironically enough made his last appearance in the Portadown shirt on the 26th of April 1997, again against Crusaders. During his time at the club, he won a league title, he won a League Cup, and he won an Ulster Cup. So welcome, Gary, and thank you very much for taking the time out to join us here this morning.
No problem, Johnny. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Very good. So, Gary, we're going to start. If you want to tell us a wee bit about your early career in Scotland, how you got started. I know you were at St Mirren and Partick Thistle. If you want to talk us through how you got to those clubs and your early career.
Yeah, no problem. I think like most kids, you played with your local juvenile team, as it's known in Scotland, a team called Glenafar Thistle, a well-established team in the Paisley area. And from there, I was doing well. I was a striker at the time. I was scoring a load of goals, and I was getting offered trials. I had a trial with Rangers, Motherwell, Dundee, various clubs. But then I was training at St Mirren because I'm a local boy. And St Mirren had seen me play and invited me down to train. So I trained 2 nights a week. And then at the end of the season, it was a bit funny because I got an offer to sign for Motherwell. And then the following night, I got a phone call to go and sign for St Mirren. And because I was a local boy and St Mirren's my team, I just jumped at the chance. I'd no sooner signed and come back home when I got a phone call for the Dundee scout to say that Archie Knox wanted me to go up to Dundee on the Friday to sign full time. But it was too late. So I signed with St Mirren as a striker, started my career well, scored goals, and then I just went into a period where I couldn't hit a coon at the backside with a banjo, as the saying goes. So I then went to the manager at the time, was a guy called Alec Miller, and I said to him, I'm not really playing, what's the story? He said, well, you're not scoring goals, you're a striker. And I said, well, play me somewhere else. So I ended up playing left back for the last 8 games of the season. And to be honest, I think I got man of the match in 6 of the games and I got a new contract. And then it went through there. I started playing fullback, centre half, played there for the next 3 or 4 years, made about 15 appearances in the first team. Fortunate enough to make an appearance in the cup winning year 1987, which was, good. And then I got a move to Partick Thistle under John Lambie, and it was a great move for me. I'm playing regularly in the first team, played over 100 games at Thistle, had a great time there, won promotion. And then like everyone else, new players come in, I was getting kind of edged out. And then I get the phone call, really, really random. I'll never forget it. It was I think it was New Year's Eve, 1992. Ronnie McFall, this Irish accent, comes on the phone. Introduced himself and said that John Lambie would be prepared to let me go and loan to Portadown. And I've got to be honest, I'm like thinking, where's Portadown? I did not have a clue. I mean, football players are fickle people. They tend to just focus on their self, and what they're doing at that particular time. So you sort of knew what was happening in Scotland, but maybe the big clubs in England, but you didn't really know what was happening in the Irish League, to be honest. So Ronnie being Ronnie, there was a few pound in it, shall we say, and I had a discussion with my wife, and I thought, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. I'm not in the team at Partick Thistle. He's given me a couple of pound. Let's go and see how it goes. And I have to say, I absolutely loved it. I was, as you know, at that time, Portadown were a well-established team. They were fighting for honours at the top end of the table. They had guys, Stevie Cowan was there, and I knew Stevie from Scotland, but I didn't know the impact he had in Northern Ireland to actually met him the day we were flying out for the first game. him and Dougie Bell, and I knew Dougie briefly from my St Mirren and Partick Thistle days, and me and Dougie kind of hit it off then anyway. So then I arrived, and then I realised, Cowan was the main man, and then when you got to play, you realised that, by the way, there's a lot of good players in this team, a lot of good players in this league, and with a thoroughly enjoyable, I think it was 18 games I played, and unfortunately the second last game against Distilleries, we did blow the league, and then went to Windsor the last game of the season and beat them comfortably, and that kind of rankles with me because, with all due respect, I think we should have won the league that year. I think we only got ourselves to blame. I think it wasn't so much Linfield winning it. I think it was more Portadown lost it. So that was my kind of introduction to the Irish League.
Yeah, that's what I was going to you answered the question there about how a move like that, comes about. When you're moving to play football in a different country, is it like, I think you explained it perfectly there, where obviously Ronnie had got in touch with your manager at Partick Thistle. You received the phone call. It's like you say, it's not as if you're moving to another club an hour or two down the road. It's a big thing where you're flying out flying out on a Saturday morning or Friday evening, whatever it may be, flying home on a Sunday. It's a big move, and I was going to ask you about your knowledge of the Irish League and Portadown and that sort of thing. But obviously, as you say there, you weren't that familiar with it. I sort of look back, and you were joining the team. You had some fellow Scots in that Portadown team. You were talking about Stevie Conner, Dougie Bell, Sandy Fraser as well was part of that Portadown squad, and like you said, Portadown were really pushing for the title that season in that penultimate game against Distillery. I think it ended up 3-0. I think Distillery won. It was a real boat from the blue. I think Portadown were sort of expected just to turn up and roll Distillery over, and it was anything but that. You made your debut, I think, on the 9th of January 93, from what I can see here, as a substitute down at Seaview against Crusaders. What, after your first few games at Portadown, what was your overriding opinion of the Irish League? Was it better than you thought it was going to be? What did you think of the standard, once you settled into life?
No, absolutely, Johnny. I was pleasantly surprised. Again, I suppose it's like maybe players who play in England at the top level and then they come up to Scotland, they probably think this is an inferior league. But I went to the Irish League, and I've got to be honest, some of the players, if you talk about the Portadown team just itself, Joey Cunningham, you're not telling me he couldn't have played over the water. Marty Russell, fantastic player. Young Robert Casey, the potential that Robert had at that time was, phenomenal, and probably should have played across the water. Then you had established players like Alfie Stewart, Brian Strain, Greg Davison, Philip Major. That back four, and the 6 years I was there, they were probably, will go down as probably the best back four in, that era, because they played together for many, many years, won many, many trophies, and were such a solid unit. So, yes, I was pleasantly surprised. The standard was, better than I probably expected. And the game kind of suited me because I was, as you probably know, I was a kind of all-action player where, I get in about it and, made tackles and, things like that. And I was kind of box to box. So the game was fast and furious, and it kind of probably suited my game. So, yeah, no, I was really impressed. And as I say, there was loads of good players. And then as you're playing games, you see players for other teams and you think, there's a few good players in this league,
It was a real sort of, at that sort of time, it was still like a boom period for football in the Mid-Ulster area. Glenavon still had the likes of Stephen McBride and Glenn Ferguson. The league, there was a league there where any of 4 or 5 teams, could have won it. It was sort of the boom period for the Irish League at that time. And you talk about that Portadown team, probably most of the players in that team, I would say 90% of them, if not more, were part of the iconic double winning team. You're talking about Mickey Keenan, Philip Major, Greg Davison, Brian Strain, Alfie Stewart, Joey Cunningham, Sandy, and Steve. It was really a iconic team. What was your impressions of Ronnie? What was that initial phone call like? What was his man management like? Whenever you come into the club.
Ronnie was a larger than life character. he wasn't somebody that was going to sit down and be tactically, get the board up and, do all the kind of moves and what you should do. He basically just looked at the team and went, let's go and play 4-4-2 and express yourself. And as I've said, Johnny, we had good players in the team. You had guys, we spoke about the defence here, you had guys in midfield, like I came in, but you still had guys like Robert was there, Davy Mills was there. Up front, you had Sandy, Stevie, Joey Cunningham wide. So you didn't really need to say too much. You just go out and play and express yourself and, get on the ball and take it from there. Yep, if we were maybe down at half-time, he'd come in and he'd maybe have a discussion, but I think he just trusted, and Ronnie was always good. I think one of his biggest kind of strengths was he made good contacts in the game. So he was able to make a phone call to somebody in Scotland or England who would put him in touch with a striker that was maybe out of favour, or a midfield player that was out of favour, or whatever it is he required. And then he would just go and bring them in. Some would work, some wouldn't. I'm not saying that every player he brought in from Scotland or England, worked. But for the majority, players came in good authority. And, again, for the majority, they worked for him.
We sometimes forget here, the Irish League at that time was very much still a part-time league. Players have their jobs and playing as well. How did you find the effect of, flying in and flying out? Would you have flew home on a Saturday evening, or would it have been a Sunday morning? Or what way did that work for you, and how did that sort of impact on your life as well?
Well, as I say, I'm a local boy in Paisley, and St Munn's the local team. So I literally lived less than a mile from the ground. So I was training there. Obviously, I was at Partick Thistle when I first came. I was training at Partick Thistle during the week, and whenever I needed to go for a game, I would get a phone call from Ronnie to say, your tickets will be at the airport. You're on the 2:30 flight to Belfast on Tuesday, or the 7 o'clock flight on a Friday night, and we'll get you picked up at the airport. You get picked up at the airport with the taxi driver, Jackie Tedford. Lovely guy. He picked you up, took you to the Seagull, you checked in, you had your dinner, you went to your bed, you got up in the morning, they took you to the game, you played the game, and if you could get home, you got home. If you didn't, you stayed in the Seagull again, you had a few beers, and then you went home on the Sunday. And that became the kind of pattern, particularly for the sort of loan period. That was the kind of pattern, because at that time, you couldn't get a flight. The game finished at 25, 4:45. By the time you get, the discussion after the game and showered and changed and taxi, you couldn't get to Aldergrove or the city airport in time for the last flight home. That changed the second time round, where the flights started to leave for Aldergrove maybe about 6:30. So that allowed us to get quick change, get up to Aldergrove, and the people at Aldergrove knew that the players were coming for their various points in the country, and they would, kind of hold the gate to the very, very last minute to ensure that we get on it. So it was fine. Training at Partick Thistle didn't cause any change in my routine. You still trained away with the first team there, and you came. It was difficult in the sense that you didn't train with the Portadown guys. You turned up on a Saturday. But again, with all due respect, the majority of players that were coming in were good pros, played at a good level. So there wasn't any concern that you weren't fitting in, because you just you knew what you had to do.
Towards the end of your loan spell, was there any conversations with Ronnie, excuse me, about a permanent deal or staying on, or was there no chat really about that? What's your memories of that, Gary?
Well, that's interesting, because, as I said, I love my time at Portadown. That loan spell, take away the distillery game, it was a really, really successful spell. I think we won the majority of games. I think we won the Mid-Ulster Cup. The supporters and the town and the club were fantastic with me, and I really enjoyed it. And I knew at that time that my career at Partick Thistle was, was coming to an end. So I was looking at what are my options, and there was wee things, Ronnie would be interested in signing, but we didn't actually sit down and have that face-to-face conversation. Now, whether that was more about Ronnie didn't get round to it, at that time he was maybe looking, I don't know. But things just accelerated quite quickly at the end of the season, where I get the opportunity to go to Sweden. There was a guy called Dave Hodgson who used to play with Liverpool back in the 80s. He became an agent, and he'd get my name through the PFA in Scotland. He said that whoever he'd spoke to said I was a good player, and could he do anything for me? So he came on the phone pretty much at the end of the season and said, "Look, Gary, I'd be really interested in representing you. I could get you a move to Sweden, because they played in the summer football." And I was kind of humming and hawing. He said, "Look, if you don't want to take that up," he says, "I'll get you down to England." He says, "No problem." He says, "There'll be clubs, keen to sign you because I've got it in good authority that, you're a decent player." So that kind of perked me up a wee bit. Still hadn't really heard anything from Ronnie. There was some suggestion he was going to offer me a year's contract. But it didn't really materialise. And then I get the phone call from Linfield, kind of out the blue, basically saying, "We've watched you over the last number of games. We're really keen to sign you. We played the last game of the season. I played well, scored a good goal, and it just kind of snowballed from there." And to be honest, it all happened that quick. And there was a kind of security of a 2-year full-time contract. It was a similar scenario where you could fly in, fly out. So that's a kind of long answer to your question, Johnny. But Ronnie was a bit slow off the mark, shall we say.
And he had a very successful spell at Linfield, obviously won another league title at Linfield. I think there was an Irish Cup possibly success as well. So, you were justified in your decision to join in Linfield at that time. You picked up plenty of honours. Obviously, the iconic final day, I think, was it in '94? Maybe was it the last day of the season where any one of 3 teams could have won the title and things like that. I think there was plenty of coverage of that over the summer and over lockdown. I think it was maybe the anniversary of it, and there was a lot of chat about it as well. So, like you said, Ronnie was slow off the mark. He had a full-time contract at Linfield. Why wouldn't you do that? Obviously.
Well, you're right, but as I say, I had such a good time at Portadown, and obviously Stevie was there and Dougie was there, and I think, I probably think that Stevie probably deserved another year. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew that, when I say his pace, he never had any pace. The legs had gone, but he knew the way to go, and the way that Portadown played with, Russell and Cunningham on either side, the ball was always coming into the box, and he was a predator in the box. So Stevie then moved on, and Dougie moved on, and there wasn't really. Sandy had by that time moved over to Northern Ireland, I think was living there. So there wasn't any other Scottish players. I don't know if it was just about Ronnie reassessing the budget and who he could and couldn't bring in. Mm-hmm. But if Ronnie had made me the offer, I would have signed. Mm-hmm. Because at that point I was really enjoying my football. But as you say, I went to Linfield, and the rest is history. Yeah. 2 years there, and it worked out very well for me. Mm-hmm. So,
you were talking that season you left alone after your loan spell. You were talking there, obviously Stevie and Dougie also left that summer as well. Would be a bit that summer there of 93, 94 was a bit of an upheaval for Portadown. I think Ronnie brought in that summer Trevor Smith, Tony Shepherd, and Joe McLeod also arrived as well. I think Joe maybe only lasted maybe 6 months at the club before he went back to Scotland. Trevor lasted a season and a bit, and then left in a swap deal for Neil Cantus at Glentoran, and Tony stayed, I think, for 2 years, and then would end up signing for Glenavon. It was a real upheaval. You would then obviously, in another summer of upheaval, at Portadown would arrive back then in the summer of 1995. You joined along with Tim Dalton, Peter Kennedy, and Gary Hellock also joined that summer. I think Ronnie made it a summer of intent, so to speak. Again, as we talked about, how did the move come about? How did Ronnie sell the club to you? Stuff like that again.
Well, on one hand, Ronnie was slow off the mark in 1993, but on the other hand, in 1995, he was well off the mark. He was like first in the queue. I mean, what had happened is I'd struggled that season with an Achilles injury, but I'd still scored a barrel load of goals in midfield, and I was still contributing to the team at Linfield, and we won the Irish Cup. And then out of the blue, the manager phoned me and said, "Look, the club are going to put you in the transfer list." And I went, "All right." So me being me, I'm no daft. I went straight on the phone. to Ronnie and the others, and I said, look, Linfield's going to put me in the transfer list. Are you interested? Ronnie went, absolutely. Leave it with me. And as you know, in Irish League at that time, you know, paying 15, 20 grand, 25 grand for a player was a lot of money. So Ronnie was kind of hedging his bets a wee bit. You know, he was keeping in contact with me saying, look, we're really keen to sign you, but, you know, we don't want to get stung here, you know, because my profile at the time was, you know, high. So weeks went on, I was keeping in contact. One or two other clubs were kind of in contact, but everybody was scared of going to a tribunal in case they put in a silly amount. And then I think we get into July, I was still training at St Mirren, and Ronnie phoned and he said, look, Gary, we're just going to go for this. He said, just take our chances. And I met him and the directors at the hotel at the airport, up at the international airport, and we cut a deal, and it went to a tribunal, and I think Portadown had to pay 20 grand or 22 grand or something like that. I don't know what it was, and I signed, and I was delighted to sign because I knew the Haylock situation, because I was fairly friendly with Gary, you know, through our Linfield days. So he'd been in contact with me to say, look, there's a problem here with my registration, you know, and I've got an offer for Portadown that I'm going to take. So that was a kind of win-win as well, because we had kind of struck up a good relationship on the park, and I knew that he was potentially coming to Portadown. Obviously knew Peter Kennedy was a fantastic player at Glenavon, and to get him was just, again, Ronnie being Ronnie, you know, obviously working his magic. Tim Dalton was a very experienced goalkeeper who played at a really high level. So it's fair to say that was 4 quality signings that season, with, as you say, a season with intent. And I mean, it was a fantastic season, you know, the whole round, you know, winning a couple of, I think we won the League Cup and the Ulster Cup, you know, and then we won the league, you know, the second last game of the season when I think Crusaders drew at Cliftonville, and that sort of gave us a league. So, aye, Ronnie was well off the mark that time.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't long until he would come up against Linfield. I was watching some highlights back last night. We played them then, I think it was the Ulster Cup quarter-final, up at Shamrock Park. I finished 0-0. We won on a penalty shootout. Gary Haylock obviously took the bulk of abuse. I think it was his first time obviously playing Portadown against Linfield banners and so forth. You were well thought of Linfield. I'm not sure if you received much abuse after you departed the club to go to Portadown. I would say, did you feel that Gary's move, as controversial as it was, took some of the heat off you a wee bit? But as you're saying, you were transfer listed and it was the club's decision, so I suppose in a way there was no abuse to be given, if you know what I mean.
It was, to be fair, Johnny, it was a kind of win-win for me, because, you know, even now, you know what, we've made contact through Twitter, so I'm on Twitter, and a lot of the people that follow me on Twitter are Blue Men, you know, Portadown fans and the like, and they've been nothing but, you know, complimentary about my time at the club, or my time at Portadown, or my time in the Irish League. So it was a win-win for me. I had contributed well in the 2 years that I was there. I was probably viewed as a kind of iconic figure in the sense of pulled the jersey over the head. I would pop up with goals. I had, you know, I was a bit of a character. You know, I used to have a bit of banter with the opposing supporters. I was expected to win tackles. So, you know, the supporters took to me. So when I went to Portadown, it was really pleasing, because when I came out that night, the Linfield fans were singing my name, and I think that was them basically telling the Linfield hierarchy that you've actually just sold one of what we perceive one of our better players to one of our, you know, our biggest rivals. So getting back to the Haylock situation, like, Gary was made an offer for Portadown that he literally couldn't turn down. Right, I don't know what the finances were or what the, you know, the money was involved, but it was well documented. It was a reasonable amount of money that he was getting offered to sign, and, you know, in a weekly wage. And Gary, like any person at that time, has, you know, I think he had a young family, or he was just married, or, you know, was trying to get a bit of security. So he kind of left, and Linfield, I think, had pushed the boat out to try and keep him. And there was a whole registration fiasco that meant that he could actually leave on a free. So, the fact that he could leave on a free meant that I think more of the money went to him than, you know, it would have went to Linfield as a transfer fee. So by doing that and then playing Linfield, 100%, Haylock got absolute pelters. And even now, when you're speaking to guys on Twitter or, you know, a Linfield thing comes up, he still gets pelters. You know, I don't think they'll ever forgive him for the way that he left and the circumstances surrounding it. But at that time, Linfield's loss was Portadown's gain because, as you know, Johnny was a fantastic striker, you know, scored goals for fun and was a massive part of that successful season.
Did you feel with Ronnie's signings that he made in the summer and the squad that was already there, did you have that belief to yourself, this team can win the title, we're capable of doing big things this season? Did you have that feeling?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you go back to the 93-94, it wasn't... Portadown lost the league as much as Linfield won the league. It was one of the ones where, you know, we went to Shamrock Park and if Portadown won, they win the league. Mm-hmm. We win 2-0. Portadown, I think, go to Ballymena and I think they draw.
Yeah,
and
that's
if they win the league, something like that. They've then got Glenavon, their biggest rivals, who, to be fair, were a great side back in the day. They've got a chance of beating them to win the league. So they had the league in their hands for 3 or 4 games, and that was because of the squad that they had then. Similarly, when we got to 95, it was a kind of similar type thing. You know, if you bring Haylock in as your kind of Trevor Smith type, you bring me in as your Tony Shepherd type, and you bring Joe McLeod in as your kind of Peter Kennedy type. So there was kind of 3 similar type players there. Allied to the back 4 that was already established. Allied to Robert Casey by this time was one of the top midfield players in the country. Young, bags of energy. Marty Russell, probably the most skillful player in the country. Joey kind of floated in and out. He kind of struggled with injuries.
I don't think Joey played at all that season. I think.
Did he not play at all? Did he?
I think he finished. He got I think it was possibly a shoulder injury the season before, and I think he didn't play again after that. To the best of my knowledge now.
You might be right. So that was a basis of a right good quality team, and then you had other kind of backup players, a couple of young players coming through. Paul Evans, the fullback. Who was the young fullback? Gareth.
Yeah, Gareth Bolton. Because there was a registration. There was a bit of a registration thing at the beginning of that season over his registration. I think we'd already possibly won the Ulster Cup, and then there was a query over Gareth's registration, and there was talk that Portadown might have had to forfeit the Ulster Cup and lose league points. And I think it went quite high up. It was quite a big story at the time, but I think then Portadown were found to be in the right from a memory, didn't lose any points or any. But no, you were saying you're right. But then you had also Ian Ferguson was another Scottish import playing up front at the time as well at that time. So you had I suppose that perfect blend of experience and youth coming through as well.
And that was again to credit Ronnie. Ronnie could see that we had a good team. He could see that we were challenging. We'd won a couple of trophies, but then he went and strengthened. So he added another wee kind of mix to that and just kind of bolstered it. We brought in the young boy.
It was Jamie Woodsford came in towards the last 6 or 7 games of the season and scored a bucket loads of goals. I think he scored a hat-trick down at Cliftonville.
That's right.
He really made a big impact as well. So he also added Raymond Byrne, I think, came in early in the season as well that year. I think Alfie maybe struggled with injuries and stuff a wee bit during the campaign. So like you say, Ronnie was ideal at seeing if there was going to be an issue somewhere, if something needed added, and going and getting it. And like you said, 8 or 9 times out of 10 it worked.
I mean, Peter Kennedy that year was absolutely on fire. I mean, he was playing at a different level for everybody else, and that kind of culminated in his move across the water where he had a successful career, but he was absolutely flying. He was scoring goals from all angles. So when you've got somebody like that, allied to what you had, allied to Haylock's goals, allied to the fact that you had a solid back 4 and a good keeper, it does make a good recipe for a championship winning team,
Definitely does. As I say, you scored the winning penalty in the shootout against Linfield at Shamrock in the quarter-final or semi-final of the was it the Ulster Cup, I think. Then we went on and we beat Linfield in the Ulster Cup. We beat Crusaders, I think, in the League Cup that season as well. You I think you scored against Linfield in the Ulster Cup final, from what I can remember. It went to penalty. I think Neil Candlish scored the winning penalty. So it was a really successful season. Ronnie was justified in his dealings in the transfer market that summer. And then obviously, winning the title as well. It was the first season of the new Premier League format, I think, with the 12 teams. So you were playing big teams every week. It wasn't like the 16-team league previously, where sometimes you maybe had 5 or 6 matches where you were just expected to roll teams over. We had every few weeks you would have had a Linfield, Glentoran, Glenavon, Crusaders, Cliftonville. You were, if you won the league that season, you deserved to win it, because it was big teams every fixture. What are your memories, I suppose, of that final, or that penultimate game against Glenavon at a rainy Shamrock Park to win the title?
Well, I was thinking about this on the back of your invitation to come on this, Johnny, and I was thinking of some of the games, and if my memory serves me right, did Glenavon no beat us 7-0?
Yes, I was sort of going through my research here today, and there was a big win for Glenavon. I'm sort of looking through Yes, Glenavon beat us on 7-0 at Mornview on the 17th of February that season.
Yeah. So I knew that it was a big win, and I knew that obviously the history and the rivalry, and then I knew that we got the game at Shamrock Park. Glenavon come second to last game of the season. Crusaders, I think, I don't know for a head and goal difference. I don't know where it worked out. But anyway, we had a fantastic victory, 2-1, and we then came in to find out that Crusaders had drew with Cliftonville, which meant that we had won the league, which was great because you're going to Seaview the last game of the season, and as you know, they were a big, strong, imposing team. They took no prisoners. It's a hard place to go. So to go there as league champions, get the Guard of Honour, you could play with a bit of freedom. You were relaxed. You knew what was going to happen at the end of the game, and you were getting the presentation. So it was a great end to the season.
Yeah, I'm just sort of looking through some notes I made that season as well. We beat Crusaders in the League Cup final, but it was very, very tight in the league. I don't think we beat them in the league that season. I think there was 2 draws, and they had beat us up at Seaview 3-1. We went into that Glenavon match a point ahead of Crusaders, from what I can see in front of me here. But we had a much inferior goal difference. So obviously them drawing, us winning. But also beat Crusaders 6-1 that season in a League Cup tie up at Seaview. I remember, especially for Mickey Keenan coming on for the last 15 minutes up front for Portadown. I think it was only 3 subs, and Portadown had used their 2. Somebody got injured, and Mickey came and goal hung for the last quarter of the game. As I say, I was looking through highlights of that Glenavon game the other night. I think Glenavon took the lead early doors. I think
they did,
and then
I think Fergie scored with a header, didn't he?
Yes, I think there was a shot.
Scored the winner.
Tim Dalton sort of palmed it out into McBride's path, I think it was, and scored. And then we got a penalty, which Gary Hellock dispatched. I always remember, was it a Glenavon player threw a bit of muck just as at the ball, just as Hellock was running up to it, and then Ian Ferguson scored a header then to win the game. I was keep harping on about looking back to the highlights. It was a just, I suppose it showed the hunger and the fight of the team. I think it was Gary Hellock took on a shot at a tight angle. I think Neil Candlish was maybe beside him. I think if he had scored it, Neil would have scored. And I think Gary and Neil had a bit of a shoving match for a couple of seconds after. I think Neil was not so unhappy, but I suppose that shows the fight and hunger in the team to win.
Well, there was another player that was there, Neil Candlish, and probably Neil, I don't know if he gets the credit that he deserves, but his contribution that year was fantastic as well. He weighed in with some crucial goals, and he was always a good outlet, a good foil up front, because he was tricky and he had a bit of pace.
What were your we talked as I said, to Robert and Mark McCanny won trophies. What are your memories of the night after that? Was there a big party? Did you go out? Did you celebrate? What was it? What happened after that game?
Was that after the Glenavon game?
Yes. Well, suppose now looking back, I say that we then, I think, had a Ash, no, well, looking back here, Glenavon had beat us the week before, actually, in an Ash Cup semi-final replay, was it? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
I thought that was after this game. No, yeah, after the Glenavon game, he sealed the title. Any stories about the celebrations or what happened after
I
that?
think, to be honest, Johnny, I can't really remember after that game. What I can remember after the presentation of the trophy, we came back to Portadown and we had a open top bus through the town, and it was brilliant. You know, the whole town was out, everybody cheering and everybody in great spirits. And I remember I had the trophy. I think I was up the top of the bus, and I think I just threw the trophy down to the supporters. And I think about 3 or 4 of the directors started to panic. You know, like, Gary, can't do that. You can't do that. And I was, by that time, the euphoria was just overtaking you. You were just in such good spirits. So I thought that was quite funny, you know, and all the boys are running about me going, what are you doing? And I threw, and this, I think about half a dozen supporters are at the back of the bus with the trophy, giving it loudly, you know. So I remember that. But after the Glenavon game, I don't know. I think we probably thought, we thought that we would beat Glenavon quite clearly, but I think we also thought that Crusaders would have enough to beat Cliftonville. So I think the focus was on the last game of the season going to Seaview, and it was almost like a title decider. So it came as a bit of a surprise that because Cliftonville, they weren't great that year, so it was very much a surprise that Crusaders didn't win the game and take it to a decider. So we probably just had a few beers in the Seagull. I don't know if he even stayed over. Normally you stayed over, you were in the Seagull Hotel or maybe down to the rugby club, but I can't honestly remember.
I'm looking through some of, you know, as you said, there was big players that season, the likes of yourself, Peter Kennedy, Gary Haylock, you know, the back four. But there's some players that sort of do slip under the radar. You mentioned Neil Candice there. I'm looking at the likes of Paul Carlisle, also came in that season. I always remember him being a great crosser of the ball. He possibly crossed the ball maybe on that day for Ian Ferguson's header, possibly. Also look at the, like you talk about, Paul Evans there. There's also Kevin Bain, another Scottish import, came in for the last few games of that season as well. So, you know, there's smattering of players that some, like you said, the likes of Gareth Fulton, that fall under the radar but made a big impact that season as well when called upon.
Well, Paul Carlisle came in and he came with a big reputation for the. I think he played at Derry City.
Yeah.
And he kind of struggled a wee bit, but I remember he scored a wonder goal at Coleraine. I think we went up there and we drew 2 each, and I think he scored a wonder goal to get a crucial point. So he contributed. Kevin Bain. Kevin had been playing at Dundee, and I think he'd fell out of favour, and he came over, and you know, I think Alfie was out injured, or Strainer was out injured, and Kevin came in and, you know, played well for I think half a dozen games he was there. I don't know how many games in total, but he certainly fitted in well.
Another Scottish import from that season that's still talked about now, even though I think he only made, looking at my notes here, he only made 5 appearances with Scott Leach. He came in for literally only a month. I think he played in that cup final. I think he played in the Ulster Cup final against Linfield that season. He made a big impact. He really impressed in his month or so that he was here.
He was a kind of established player in the Scottish Premier League, and I think he'd been injured, and then I think he might have been at Dunfermline or Hearts or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. And he came in loan. You're right, for that month, and he played in one of the cup finals. But again, credit to Ronnie. Ronnie probably made a phone call. I don't know if one of our midfielders were injured, because I played a few games with Scott. So I don't know if Robert was injured or Robert played up front or moved somewhere else, and it was me and Scott Leach in the middle of the park. I think that was probably.
Yeah, I'm looking back. I think Ian Ferguson missed large chunks of that season through injury, so I think that's where Scott Leach sort of came in then. I think as a replacement, a placement for Ian. We'll look back then. We'll look forward into the next season, which wasn't as successful. Unfortunately, now sort of a mid-table finish, didn't really challenge at all. Obviously, lost Peter Kennedy. He went across the water to Notts County, which was a big loss that season. I'm sort of looking to see if Ronnie didn't really make many changes that summer. Not many came in. I'm looking. Stephen Livingstone came in from Crusaders, although he only played a handful of matches, and then I think he went to Glentoran in a swap deal where Ronnie brought Trevor Smith back to the club.
Yeah.
That season as well. There was quite a few Scottish loan players came in that season as well. There wasn't, looking back, there was never, Ronnie didn't seem to get a settled team that season. I think Kevin Bain returned that season for a loan spell. Yep. There was Tony Scully, I think, also came in as well. But what's your memories of that season? It seems very, looking again at my stats, it seemed very disjointed, no real settled team.
Well, from a personal point of view, I think I tore my Achilles tendon. I think maybe in September against, I think we played Ballyclare. There was a competition at the beginning of the season where it was a kind of league section or something.
Yeah, you're right, yes.
And I injured my Achilles and I had to go for an operation. So I never come back the December time. And I think, again, probably alongside that, there was maybe others who picked up injuries and we couldn't get a settled formation, hence the reason he was bringing in a lot of kind of loan players that not that they didn't work, but he just didn't get the kind of settled team that he'd had the year before. And then I think around about December time, I get back into the team. And then, by that time, I think we were just mid-table. You know, the season was just kind of floating away, and it didn't really pan out as we probably expected at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, no, like looking through, there was barely a weekend or a week went past there. Looking at the notes here, that the same team would have played consecutive matches. Like you said, it was a very up and down season. There was a lot. Davy Kirkwood, I think, came in on loan there for 6 or 7 games. Yeah. O'Driscoll came in as well. There's Cargill. There's a lot of loan signings, and obviously, an unsettled team never really, it's hard to get any momentum going, build up any consistency.
There was another Ian Ferguson came in, wasn't there?
Yes, there was a period there. Yep, there was another Ian Ferguson came in.
He did okay.
Yeah,
but I think he get recalled back. I think he was maybe at the time he was at Wraith Rovers, and I think under Jimmy Nicholl, and I think he came to us. He scored a few goals, and I think Jimmy Nicholl recalled him.
Yeah,
because I think Ronnie was keen to try and keep him longer.
There was a game here. It was against Linfield in the County Antrim Shield quarter final, where you scored. Gary Hedlock and Ian Ferguson, I think, scored the winner as well. I was looking back. You had a knack for scoring goals or important goals against Linfield. You scored in that quarter final. You also scored in the last appearance of your loan spell. You scored the winning penalty in this, in the early season penalty kick shootout against Linfield, and then in the Ulster Cup. And you sort of had that knack for scoring against Linfield, didn't you?
I did that season when I went to Portadown, and that was obviously pleasing given what had happened at Linfield, and obviously from a Portadown perspective it was pleasing as well. But I had that knack in my career in the Irish League, Johnny. I seemed to pop up, whether it was with a winning goal or a winning penalty or a goal in a cup final that contributed to winning. At Linfield, I scored the winning goal in the quarter final of the Irish Cup. I scored the winning goal in the League Cup final. I scored the winning goal in the Irish Cup final. I had that kind of knack of popping up with a goal, and a lot of them seemed to be quite important goals, Mm-hmm. So yeah, but that season, it was disappointing from a personal point of view, obviously with injury, and then it didn't end well because there was a whole controversy with me and the player for Glenavon. So my season kind of ended not as expected. But to be fair again to the club were absolutely fantastic with me during my injury. They put me into private healthcare and I got operation, and then after the whole carry on, the Glenavon debacle, they supported me and continued. They could have easily have sacked me and moved me on, but they didn't. They still paid my wages. I think there still was due some signing on fee, and they looked after me fantastic. And then at the end of the season, I think it was just one of the ones where I think Ronnie felt let's go in a different direction, and I was kind of on the transfer list and then moved to Newry. But no, the season didn't end well, given the season before and the quality of player that we had in the squad. It was a disappointing season.
Mm-hmm. like you said, then you moved on to Newry, who were at the time. When you look at the likes of what Larne are doing now in the Irish League, that's what Newry were threatening to do at that time. They were bringing in big investors, and there was talk that they were going to challenge the big teams and stuff. I think you ended up at Newry. I believe Trevor Smith went to Newry as well, and Desi Gorman. You know, they made big signs, but it obviously didn't happen.
It was that was a crazy time in the Irish League, and I've had these conversations with some guys on Twitter, you know, and the people of a certain age who remember the kind of the early to mid 90s to late 90s, you know, talk really fondly about that's when the Irish League was at its best because of the players were flying in, the players that were in the league. You know, when you think of likes of Glenavon, Ferguson, McCoy, and McBride, I mean, what a strike force that was, you know. Then you had the Crusaders team who were, you know, solid. You'd Portadown, who were always in and around with the quality of players that they had. Then you had Linfield, who always attract the biggest, you know, players. And then you had Glentoran. And then even at the end of the 90s, Cliftonville came into the force.
League in 1998, yeah.
It was a great time. It was a great time to be playing football, and I think it was a great time to be a supporter of the Irish League because, you know, it was just loads of good quality football, loads of good players, loads of characters. I feel at the moment, because I keep in touch with the game, and I feel that there isn't the level of character that there was back then. Playing at the moment is whether the game's maybe more professional because a lot of clubs are full time. I'm not so sure, but back then, you just look forward to a Saturday afternoon, you know.
I was looking, Marshall Gillespie. We were talking about that here in the Irish League. Marshall Gillespie, he's an Irish League statistician. He's very prominent on Twitter. You know, he put up some stats last night about goal scoring partnerships. I was looking there. Glenn Ferguson and Stephen McBride scored a combined, I think, 80 goals between them in the 94-95 season, and empty-handed. You know, didn't win a title, which, you know, it just goes to show during the mid 90s, early 90s of the Irish League, you know, how big of a product it was. You look back now at some of the highlights, some of the grounds are absolutely chock-a-block.
Absolutely.
And some of the players on show at that time and the goals scored, and, you know, like they score 80 goals in the season and not have anything to show for it. It just goes to show the quality that was in the league at that time.
I mean, I think Glenavon, with all due respect, they were always the bridesmaid and never the bride, weren't they? You know, as you say, they are, you know, 80 goals in a season and you've got nothing to show for it. It's just ridiculous. And they had a quality team for 3 or 4 seasons, but yet it was Portadown that was winning the league, or it was Linfield that was winning the league, or, you know, it was Glentoran winning the league, or Crusaders. And Glenavon, you know, for the player that they had, it was a disappointing return in terms of trophy-wise, you know.
Yeah. Even the season we won the league and they beat us 7 at Mourneview Park, we still went on, you know, to win the league. And, you know, sometimes you wonder, you know, what you have to do to win a league title. But
if my memory serves me right, Johnny, did we not beat them? I think I watched it on YouTube about 7-8 months ago. We beat them. Did we not beat them in a semi-final at Mourneview in one of the competitions, the League Cup or the Ulster Cup? Haylock scored 2. I think we beat them 3-2.
Now that does ring a bell. I'm just looking through my notes here now. Gary, I know there was a County Antrim Shield.
We beat them in a semi-final at Mourneview. It was under the lights Tuesday night, and it was a fantastic game. And we beat them. I'm sure we beat them 3-2.
Yes, now I think I know the game, but I think that was at Shamrock. Maybe we beat them 3-2 in the semi-final under the lights.
No, it was definitely at Mourneview.
Was it definitely at Mourneview?
Yeah.
Because I have a memory of us. We beat them in the Ulster Cup semi-final now. Yes, you're right. Maybe that was, yes. 10th of October, 95, we beat them. This has it listed as away. We beat them 3-2 in the Ulster Cup semi-final, 3-2, you're right. That was a great night. And Gary Haylock scored 2.
Yeah. You talk about crowds, I think it was a Tuesday night. There must have been easy 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 in the ground. It was, you know, it was great atmosphere.
And that was the norm. That was the norm at that stage. I was even watching, you're talking about YouTube highlights, and it's like, I think something came up. I think it was Glenavon against Ards at Mourneview, and, you know, Ards you wouldn't have thought are notoriously for having a big crowd, but Mourneview's packed. for Glenavon against Ard's game midweek.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show the pull that they actually had at that time. Then you went on after you went to Ards, isn't that right, Gary, for a period?
Now, to be honest, I went to Newry. We did such a good first season. We won the first division. It was one of the learned situations that you alluded to. A local businessman came in, wanted to make Newry the next big thing. Spent a bit of money, brought in players, paid them decent wages, paid them decent sign-on fees, but you just knew that he didn't have the money that maybe the landowner has, and it was just it was one of these kind of 2-season wonders.
Yeah.
And what had happened is I was kind of in and out of the team, kind of fell out of favour with Ollie Ralph and Harry Fay were the managers. Although they were the managers, Trevor Anderson almost had the casting vote. It was that kind of set up, Trevor had been kind of headhunted to go as a kind of director of football, but they were the front men, but he was the guy who made the decisions. And I had been kind of in and out of the team, and they brought me over for a midweek County Antrim Shield game against Crusaders, and it was a horrible night, frozen pitch. Anyway, unbeknownst to me, I tore my hamstring. I realised at the time, I ruptured my hamstring. I thought I tore my hamstring, and that more or less finished my career. So I went back, and I should have went to hospital, but you think it'll just mend itself, it'll be fine. 2-3 months later, I'm really struggling. I'm running like a lame horse, and I wasn't the quickest in the best of times. And I thought, this isn't really happening. So I left Newry. I ended up in a bit of a kind of court battle with them over wages and different things that I won, thankfully. And I was out of contract, and I got a phone call from Tommy Cassidy, who phoned me out of the blue and said, would you be interested in coming to Ards? And to be honest, I went. I wasn't as fit as I should have been, but I did actually quite well. We played 6 games. I think we won 5, drew 1. I scored, and he was keen to sign me. And then when we started talking kind of figures, it wasn't so much. By that time, I wasn't chasing the big money. That time, I knew at that time my kind of full-time career was coming to an end, and it was time to get into the working world. So I wasn't being hard to deal with, and we kind of spoke money. And then he phoned me up and he said, "Look, Gary, I'd love to sign you." He says, "But by the time we pay your wages, by the time we fly you over, by the time we pay for a taxi to collect you, by the time we, pay your hotel bill," he said, "financially, it's not really a good deal for us." And I said, "You know what? Absolutely fine." He says, "Look, I really appreciate you playing for the month, and wish you all the best." And I come back to Scotland, and I was just going to chuck it, Johnny, and then I played junior for a wee while. People were phoning me up, come and play, and I went. But at that time, my hamstring had done me in, so I think I lasted about a year, and then I just retired. I just gave up altogether.
And what do you have nowadays, Gary? What's your job, or how do you keep yourself busy?
I'm a operations manager in a residential stroke secure unit in Paisley. It's a big residential. It's the biggest one of its kind in the UK. Kibble Education and Care Centre. I started working there on a kind of part-time basis when I was at Linfield, and then I went and get qualifications, and then just kind of, because I was always cute enough to know that my football career wouldn't last forever. So rather than just kind of finish football and then realise what am I going to do, I'd kind of planned and prepared 3 or 4 years before I actually finished. So I'd already kind of halfway into getting the qualifications, and then worked myself up, and I'm now an operations manager in that organisation. So I've got a good job. It's been a good career, and fortunately I've been able to work through the pandemic, because our job's 365 days a year, 24/7. So in that sense, it's been good. Football-wise, Johnny, me and Sammy Johnson, I don't know if you remember Sammy Johnson, played with Glenavon.
Yes.
Well, Sammy was a good pal of mine at Partick Thistle, and we kind of kept in touch, and we ended up managing a wee local kind of junior club, some like maybe Moyola Park or Loch Gall back in the day, that type of level, and we did well. And then it was taking up too much time, and And I thought, you know what? Let's just get out when the going's good. We took them. We'd won a league. We'd won a cup, and we'd made them finish 4th in the kind of Premier League of the junior leagues. And we thought, right, that's time just to kind of bow out. And I've not been involved in football since 2008. So I come over. It's on my to-do list is to come over and go to a Portadown game and take in a game. The difficulty with that is you fly into Belfast, you stay in Belfast for the weekend, so you tend to go to a game in Belfast. What I need to do is come over, hire a car, and drive down to a Portadown game, take in a game, and try and catch up with some old faces. You know, as I say, the club are fantastic with me. I've got nothing but good things to say about Portadown, and that's probably reflected in my tweets and my Twitter account. You know, I'm always making comments and always looking for the result and always wishing them well. So, you know, I've got nothing but fond memories about Portadown.
Yeah, we'll certainly love to have you back at Shamrock, Gary. At the minute, we'd love to have anybody at Shamrock at the moment. So we wouldn't know, but definitely in the future, definitely would love to have you back at Shamrock, Gary. Once you quit playing football, did you notice a big change? You know, you hear about footballers where they have that routine of training Tuesday, Thursday, match days and stuff. Is it something that you miss, Gary, or is it something that you now appreciate some family time and not having the same constraints that you were under?
Well, I'm quite lucky, Johnny, and I'm one of these people where I had my career, I had a decent career, played with a lot of good players, played in a lot of good sides, you know, won a few trophies. I was then able to kind of make that transition into kind of full-time employment without the feeling the need to still be involved. Something that kind of rankles with me is ex-players who are hanging on to the coattails of a coaching job or a scouting job, and you know, and then they move from club to club, and it's like they're trying to hang in there. It's like, just move on and go and have your career, you know, and go on with it. So what I miss is the banter. You know, you miss the characters. You know, you talk about like a Portadown, you know, your Greg Davisons, your Philip Majors, you know, characters of the game who, you know, kept the dressing room bubbly and funny and what have you. So you miss that. And obviously you miss the games, but the other bits, I can take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm. What I'm going to do now, Gary, is I'm going to run through some players, sort of a word association. I just want you to give me one word that you think sums up that player or describes them. Is that okay?
Yep.
Right. Ronnie McFall.
Legend.
Gary Hellock.
Selfish.
Brian Strain.
Leader.
Joey Cunningham.
Unbelievable talent.
Greg Davison.
Brilliant character.
And finally, we will go with Alfie Stewart.
Gentleman.
Now, to round off, Gary was saying that, is there any stories or anything that sticks in your mind from your time at Portadown? Any wee quirky stories or funny stories or wee things that are sort of fall under the radar that nobody might know about?
Well, I'll tell you this story. It was back in the day, there was a lot of the kind of humour at the time would be, say you were driving down the street and you drove by Asda and somebody goes, is there an Asda route near here? Somebody goes, oh, there it's here, as if they would just dive in, you know, stupidly. So we were over in Vojvodina. We were playing Vojvodina. And the older people who watch this will probably, you know, get this probably more than the younger people. But there was a famous player, Emlyn Hughes, who played with Liverpool, and his nickname was Crazy Horse. So we played the game, we went out for a few beers, we were in this bar called Crazy Horse. So imagine we're in there, we're having a few beers, banter's flying, and Davidson and Major pipe up and go, I can't believe Emlyn Hughes built this pub. Now, we're in the middle of Vojvodina, right, the middle of Yugoslavia, and right away I dived in. Who? Emlyn Hughes built this pub? And so you can just see they two laughing at each other. I've dived in, hook, line and sinker. And then you sit and realise, how on earth is bloody Emlyn Hughes going to build a pub in the middle of Belgrade, Novi Sad or wherever we were, called Crazy Horse? You know, it was just ridiculous. And I just was like, oh, I need to get them back. So that was a good wee story, because that was the kind of humour at the time. You would just fire wee things in that was so obvious that it was so stupid to dive in. And it was so obvious that Emily Hughes didn't build the pub in Voicewood, you know what I mean? And big Dafty here dives in. So, but other than that, you know, it's hard because it was such a long time ago, Johnny, that a lot of the stories it's not, you know, I was on a podcast before and I told the story about me getting invited to the UTV studio, and it was a whole wind up, you know, I was meant to go on the Jerry Kelly show, so I told that story. But nah, you just miss people like, say, your Davidsons, Majors, and that, because they were characters. You know, they kept the dressing room going. You know, they were the guys. They were the heartbeat of the team. And then you miss, you know, and footballers, again, you don't really keep in touch. Twitter's been a godsend for me, because I'm not really a big social media person, so I don't have Facebook, and, you know, I don't have Snapchat or Instagram or anything like that. It's not really for me. And it was just a few years ago I thought, I'm going to try this Twitter. And then, you know, people like yourself who maybe, you know, came and watched, and you get in contact, and you start talking about games, and you start talking about periods of your career, and it's been absolutely brilliant. You know, people posting pictures, people making comment, you know, people compliment you as a player, people saying, you know, I wish we had a Gary Peebles in our team. Remember that game? Or here's a clip of a goal. You know, I had a guy last night sending me pictures of one of my Partick Thistle days, you know, and then tell me to watch the highlights because, you know, something happened that I was involved in, and it's great. So Twitter's been an absolute godsend, particularly from a Northern Ireland point of view.
Yeah.
You know, made some great connections with people that you almost class them your friends now, and you don't really know them, but you just kind of know them through Twitter. Because you're in much contact, you know, and I've did a couple of podcasts like this with other people, and it's been absolutely brilliant. Really, really enjoyed it.
What's your Twitter handle, Gary, for people that maybe don't follow you on Twitter or aren't aware that you're on Twitter?
It's at Gary Peebles 4. So,
if you're give Gary a follow, certainly. There's lots of comments and lots of opinions and discussion about Irish League football. So, if you're not following Gary, give him a follow, definitely. Gary, we're going to wrap it up here. So I just want to thank you so much for giving up your Sunday morning to have a chat with you. I think we all appreciated what you've done for the club and your time at Portadown. We probably didn't appreciate those periods of time enough looking back and everything. But thank you so much, Gary, and stay safe. And thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Okay, thanks very much, Johnny. I really appreciated it, and all the best for your podcast, and all the best to Portadown for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much, Gary. Really appreciate it.